Okay, so one of the things that we really want to do when we're working with kids is to motivate them to use good behavior. So how do we do that? How can we increase the motivation for kids to follow directions, especially kids that have refusals? And we can do some things. We've talked about some preventative strategies and some things like that, but we really want to increase that motivation. So something that I put together, I call Think 3. And Think 3 are 3 things that you need to think about in order to make sure that they're in place to increase compliance and motivation. So one of the 3 things has to do with, does he understand? Second one has to do with, is the reinforcement clear? And the third one is whether or not you've incorporated choice. So to kind of go through each of these things, we want to make sure that the child understands. Like if we're asking kids to do something and they don't understand it, or they're confused about it, or it's difficult, you're going to have a low motivation for doing that task. It's like the harder something is, the more you're going to want to try to get rid of it, and you're going to use behaviors to make it go away. This was like the night my son had homework in algebra where he had to graph slope. I don't remember how to graph slope, so I'm trying to look it up, and he's having trouble, and I don't want to do my homework tonight. He's less motivated to do his homework, and of course he asked me, like, why do you graph slope? Sorry out there for all you high school teachers, I did not have a good answer because I don't remember why you graph slope. But regardless, we got through the homework, but he had more behavior trying to make it go away. And that's because he didn't understand it. I had another school that I was doing a consultation. It was a first grader, and we started out the day, so I was observing him. He had to go to OT. So we went to OT. He sat down, he had a para with him and the occupational therapist, and he did great. She had a little dry erase board, and she had written his name in dotted letters, and he had to take the dry erase marker and trace his name while the teacher or the occupational therapist kind of held his hand while he traced his name. So he obviously has some very significant fine motor or writing skill difficulties, but he did fine in OT. So then we go back to class. The other kids were kind of finishing up something, and you could tell they were getting ready to transition to something new. And he comes in, and the teacher comes over and says, "Oh, you're going to see behavior next." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I was kind of, expecting this to be an area where I was going to be able to observe some behavior. Well, all the kids were doing handwriting. So all the kids had to get out their handwriting books. They had to, for example, do a couple of pages where they were writing the uppercase K and the lowercase k and write words with the letter K. This little guy can't even write his own name without having his hand held and tracing, and then he's having all of this problem behavior during handwriting time. Well, that's not an issue of just wanting to refuse for the sake of refusing. That has to do with the fact that this is hard, that I don't understand it. Also, kids may have some of this trouble when they don't understand why there's been a change or why something's going on. I had this Asperger's student who, it was January. I had never had any behavior problems with him at all. And he only came to my room like a couple times a week at the end of the day for social skills. And so he has a sub that day in January. This was the first day his teacher had been out the whole year. And they called me down from the office and said, Joey's having trouble. Can you come help? And I'm like, I wonder what's going on. He's never had any behavior problems. So I get in there, and he's sitting in the back. He's like, he's got this look on his face like he's refusing. And I go in, and I'm like, "Hey, Joey, what's going on?" He's like, "I'm not doing her work." And I said, "What's going on?" And he says, "You see her over there, that lady, she calls herself a teacher?" And I said, "Yeah, what's going on?" "Well, she said it is time to do math. It is 9 o'clock, and everybody knows at 9 o'clock we do spelling." So he's having trouble because the schedule changed, not because he's just being difficult and wants to refuse. He was so used to a schedule. No one had ever taught him how to handle changes in schedule. So then when there was a change, he's having some refusal. So we need to make sure with that first one on Think 3, does he understand? Is it modified? Are there accommodations put in place? Does he understand? Have we set up the opportunity for him to be the most motivated to do this task because we've addressed that issue? Okay. The second one is the reinforcement clear? So the reinforcement is really, what do you get for doing it, right? And so a lot of times we need to teach that to kids. We need to teach them how and what they're going to get for making the correct response. Because sometimes I will tell teachers, you need to make sure that you reinforce the right behavior. And so a way that I do that, and kind of the one thing I always tell people, make sure you take this out of the training and write this on a card or something, but you should always use statements like "as soon as." So you say, as soon as you get your math finished, you can take a break. Now, it does a couple of things. It kind of takes out the power struggle, right? You're not sitting there saying it's time for math. I don't want to. Well, you have to. It's just as soon as you get this math finished, you can take a break. But the biggest thing it does is it makes you complete the sentence. So if you have the sentence and you're saying, well, as soon as you get your math finished, you can do social studies, which you also hate, that's a problem, right? You need to be able to fill in the reinforcement. So it automatically, I've had teachers say, okay, so if I use the as soon as statement, as soon as you get your math finished, you can, I don't have anything. That's the problem. Remember, we need reinforcement to teach new behavior, and that includes following directions and being compliant and listening to demands. So we need to let kids know, what is the reinforcement? They're having problem behavior. What is the reinforcement for them getting themselves back on track, for them doing the writing even though it's difficult? How are we going to reinforce that behavior? And if they don't know, then they're not going to be as motivated. Another one is, have you incorporated choice? And choice is a very important piece. We talked about this as a preventative strategy when we talk about asking kids if they want to do this or that. The example that I gave is a student that, you don't want to say, do you want to do math? And they say no. You say, it's time to do math. But do you want to do your math on a clipboard in the beanbag or stay at your desk? Giving them choices for things. I had this student who he wanted to hold on to this rolled up piece of paper. I don't know, why that was reinforcing for him, but he liked holding on to a rolled up piece of paper. And, it would be, okay, Joey, it's time to put it away. No, I don't want to. And he'd hold on to it and we'd say, but you have to put it away because it's time to do math. No, I want to hold it and do math at the same time. And then one of the teachers, and she's like, well, Joey, you can't do math and hold on to the paper at the same time and pretend this is the paper. He's like, yes, I can. See, I've got free hands. And so we were getting into this power struggle over turning the paper back into the backpack or the teacher's desk or whatever. So we just got a box, it was a plastic shoebox tote kind of thing from Walmart or Target or something, and put it on his desk. We say, okay, it's time to get back to math. Do you want to put your paper in the bucket or in your backpack? Well, then he's like, oh, wow, you mean I can put it right here and I can still see it and it's his choice and he's got the control? It was very helpful to not get into those power struggles with him by just making things a choice, okay? So again, our think 3, does he understand? Is the reinforcement clear? And have you incorporated choice? So I want to give one more example. And this kind of shows the example of where I went to see a kid and these things were not in place. And then once I put them in place, we were good to go. So I was doing a consultation for this student that was at the school. I opened a school many years ago, I guess 14 years ago now, Center for Autism. And we serve kids with autism and also kids with emotional disorders, some kids with ADHD, some kids with Asperger's syndrome or that high-functioning autism, bipolar, reactive attachment disorder. We have a group of kids at the Center for Autism that kind of all meet that criteria. So we have this new kid, middle school student, come in. I'll say his name was Joey. And he was very, had a lot of challenging behaviors. He had a diagnosis of oppositional defiant disorder. So he was one of those kids that you tell him to stand and he's going to sit. You tell him to use the marker, he wants the crayon. He wanted to do the opposite of everything. And he also had Asperger's syndrome, although that was not diagnosed initially, but he kind of fit in that category. Lots of refusals and that kind of thing. Now, this is Joey, new student, starts at the center. In his class, the classrooms have 3 or 4 kids in them. In his class was a kid, Tommy. We'll say his name is Tommy. And Joey, the new kid, decides Tommy is his best friend. Tommy agrees that Joey is his new best friend, but they can't stand each other. So they're constantly, arguing, and they want to sit next to each other and they want to go out to recess together, but then they're arguing over things. And so it's like this love-hate relationship where they want to be best friends, but they're constantly arguing and not getting along. So that's kind of one thing. Joey's the new student. Tommy is his new friend. They're in class together. Now, my staff came to me and said, Amy, we are having trouble at lunchtime. We have all of these kids, there's 12 of them, that have an emotional disorder, go to our cafeteria area and eat together. And we do that because for that population specifically, we are trying to get them back in the public school setting as quickly as possible. So they need to learn. They need to learn to eat in a larger group setting and not to get on each other's nerves and start yelling at each other and that kind of thing. But my staff came in and said, you got to help us with lunch. It's a nightmare. Half my staff have to go eat and they're trying to warm up lunches and do different things. And she was saying that you've got to come help us with some behavior strategies because things are just falling apart at lunch. So I walk in, and sure enough, like, these kids over here are arguing, and these kids over here, one's insulting his mother and different kinds of things. The other kid comes in giving everybody the bird, and I was just like, what? This is kind of a mess here, but I thought this is good. This will give me a lot of opportunity to kind of help them have some strategies, because I love working with kids with challenging behaviors, and this was challenging, so it was a good thing. So then all of a sudden, Joey comes in. Joey's the new student, remember? And I noticed before he came and sat down that at the table, the table, all of the kids had their names permanently taped to the table. Like, it was their name with tape, and it was permanently taped in that spot. So all the kids were sitting where their names were. And I walk in, I'm sitting there, and Joey, this new student, sits down, but he doesn't have his name on the table yet. So I thought, well, we probably need to get that going, because he's probably gonna have an issue at some point. But he always sat next to his best friend, Tommy. So Tommy had his name on the table. Joey did not. They always sat next to each other. They kind of sat next to each other at the end of the table. So I guess right before I got there, they had made the decision to move Tommy. Like, let's just separate the two of them since they're always arguing with each other. Well, first of all, they didn't tell Joey this. That was the first problem. The second problem was that they moved Tommy, and the only place that they could find was an empty seat, but the name taped on the table was Zach. So now we have a person named Tommy sitting in a chair where the table says Zach, okay? So here we go with Joey, and Joey's not happy. Joey's upset because, first of all, you moved Tommy. You didn't even tell me you were going to move him. He's my best friend. I need to be sitting by him. And he's sitting where the name says Zach. So he's all upset. Like Joey, again, he's like, that's not fair. If he gets to move, I get to move. And so he gets up and he tries to move somewhere. And they said, Joey, you need to go sit down. So he goes and sits down. He's like, no, this is not fair. If he gets to move, I get to move. So he moves over and he wedges himself in between two chairs so that he's now standing, because there's no chair there, but he's by his friend Tommy. And he's like, I'm standing here. If he gets to move, I get to move. And he had brought us pizza rolls over, and one of the teachers said, Joey, you can't eat your pizza rolls standing up. And he's like, yes, I can, and he's eating his pizza rolls. And so I thought at this point it would probably be a good idea for me to intervene. So I walked over and I said, Joey, I think there's maybe been a misunderstanding. He's like, you think? And I said, yep, I think maybe there's been a misunderstanding. I said, I don't know about you, but it's kind of bothering me that Tommy's sitting here and the name on the table says Zach. And he's like, about time somebody recognizes this ridiculousness. And I said, I know, that doesn't make sense. And your name's not on the table. He's like, I know, I've been here 2 weeks. And I said, okay, I promise you, we're going to fix that by tomorrow. Your name's going to be at the table. Tommy will be sitting where his name is. We're not going to have kids that mismatch. All of those things are going to be in place. So again, thinking back to the Think 3, first one is, does he understand? I fixed that, right? He didn't understand. There was confusion. Somebody was sitting in the wrong spot. He doesn't understand why things changed. So I fixed that piece. I made it clear. I told him what was going to be happening by tomorrow, and I fixed that piece, okay? My second question is the reinforcement clear? I now need for Joey to comply, but I also probably need to give him the incentive to know why he should comply. So I said, well, Joey, don't forget, the sooner you get your lunch finished, the sooner you get to go over to our motor room and look at your phone. We have these adult-sized rocker chairs, and when he was finished with his lunch and he got everything cleaned up, for the remainder of the lunch period, he got to go sit in the adult rocker chair and look at his National Geographic app on his phone, his favorite thing to do. So he was able to go do that, and I said, don't forget, the sooner you finish up lunch, the more time you'll have with your phone. So that helped, because he's thinking, yep, I don't want to lose my time with my phone. My last question on Think 3 is, have you incorporated choice? Now, I don't want to get into a power struggle with him, right? He's kind of starting to get himself back on track. So I'm going to say, Joey, it's not safe for you to stand and eat. I need you to sit. Do you want to sit here or here? So I gave him 2 choices. So I wasn't saying, you need to go sit down right now, but kind of giving him some of the control back. He went and picked one of the spots, he sat down, he got to look at his phone. Is that going to work every time? Absolutely not. It's not going to work every single time, but it definitely has like kind of prerequisites that you need to make sure are in place when you're talking about asking kids to do things. Can you put choice in there? Do they get it? Is the reinforcement clear? All of those things are very helpful to have in order to help with increasing compliance. And then the other piece really has to do with understanding this 3-step approach to teaching compliance that comes from the work of Dr. Ross Greene. He wrote a book called The Explosive Child, and that book is also in the resource list. But he uses these strategies to try to increase motivation, prediction, and support. And part of what he does is that by working with kids, I guess the best way he describes it, I think, is that he would say that inflexibility plus inflexibility is a formula for possible problem behavior. The kid is saying, I don't want to do math, and you're saying, but you have to. Or you have a kid that you're saying, it's time to come in for dinner. I don't want to. Well, you have to, or you're going to bed early. Whatever. That's sometimes how we respond, and that might be a perfectly fine way to respond. Remember, it's not good or bad. For some kids, they might respond very well to that. But for some of our kids who have some of this tendency for explosive problem behavior, inflexibility plus inflexibility oftentimes causes these meltdowns. And so the idea with the problem-solving approach, and there will be another video that really gets into details on this, but the problem-solving approach really looks at having the first statement or the first thing that comes out of your mouth when a child is being resistive is a statement of empathy. So again, instead of saying like, I don't want to do math, and you say, well, you have to, you might say something like, yeah, math can be hard. What's going on? And I had that exact thing happen with a kid. I thought, okay, I need to start using this approach, use more empathy, more understanding, helping to see where he's coming from so I don't get into this inflexibility plus inflexibility, which is going to lead to refusals. So it was a kid that was doing math. It was a Thursday. And normally I would say, you know what the rule is? You have to get your math finished or else it goes home for homework, that kind of thing. So it was Thursday. He's like, I'm not doing this math. This was every day. I'm not doing this math. So instead, I tried Dr. Greene's approach where I was using more empathy and understanding. And I said, yeah, math can be hard sometimes. What's going on? I never would have figured this out had I not asked the question. Because he's like, what do you mean what's going on? We're doing multiplication. You had me do multiplication on Monday. I got 100%. You had me do it on Tuesday. I got 100%. I did it on Wednesday. I got another 100%. I have clearly demonstrated to you that I understand how to do multiplication, and it's Thursday and you're asking me to do it again. So obviously, especially if you've worked with kids with Asperger's syndrome, that's pretty typical. Like, why would I want to do something that I already know how to do? So the idea with this approach is not only to start with empathy, but then sometimes you say, okay, I see your view. That makes a lot of sense to me. Let me tell you my view on things. And so what I said is, that totally makes sense why you wouldn't want to do math that you already know how to do. As a teacher, I learned something called fluency. And fluency means that you know how to do something that you already know how to do, but faster, better in your head. It's going to help you when you get into doing math in middle school and high school. So the reason I ask you to do things that you already know how to do is because I'm wanting you to practice fluency. You don't want to do them because you've already showed me that you know how. So how can we problem solve? And that's part of what Dr. Greene talks about with the problem solving approach, is that you meet in the middle. Like, can you come up with a way to solve this problem by saying, you know what, maybe you only have to do half of the problems, but I'm going to time you so we can work on fluency and kind of meet in the middle. So again, there's another video that I'll be doing on the collaborative problem solving approach by Dr. Ross Greene, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a piece of it because increasing motivation, a very important part is to start that conversation with a statement of empathy so that you can keep kids engaged. And that's what really helps kids have the skills to be able to learn how to problem solve, which we've talked about already as being a skill deficit.